Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm Amy Davis McShane. A little bit about me. I've been at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit for about 16 years and was the gifted liaison that whole time. And then I also the Career Ready PA lead, and I also do academic competitions. So I recognize a lot of the names out there that I see joining us virtually. So I'm glad to see everybody. And you gave me two very huge topics to talk about today, but I'm thrilled to talk about them. These are like two different topics that Patrice and I have been interested in getting more involved with and talking more about to teachers. So I'm going to give a high-level overview of both of these topics today. So maybe next school year or something or in the fall, I can come back and we can dive deeper into one of the topics if it's something that you find that you're really interested in. So a little bit about how Gifted is working in the state, just so that everybody knows how it works. So there's a state gifted team. So I'm the Western PA Gifted Liaison. Patrice Semichek is Eastern PA Gifted Liaison. And then we work with Shirley Moyer, who works at the Department of Education. Shirley is our compliance person. So anything related to Chapter 16 regulations, we defer to her because she's sort of the final say based on what the regulations say. Patrice and I really focus more on best practice. So I think we get a little bit more of the fun job because we can share what resources are out there, what other districts are doing, and do a lot of the training and communication out there. So we're all here to help. And then every IU has a gifted liaison. So Natalie is yours, and they're here to help as well. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free. You can email Natalie, you can email us, and we'll help you get the answer that you're looking for. So how we have it set up in the state is Shirley's compliance, Patrice and I are best practice, compliance state regulations you must follow. Not following those could result in due process or a corrective action. And like I said, the best practices are just evidence-based and more just from what districts are doing in the state and resources that are out there. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today are best practices. I have a few things in here, Chapter 16 related, but not a lot. We're really going to talk about best practice. So I'm hoping that when we're done around 10:20-ish or so, that you leave with at least one thing that you said, I didn't know that, and I can take this back and maybe use this later. That's when I go to a session, that's what I'm always hoping for, is that there's at least one thing that I can walk away with. So I'm hoping that's true for you. Before I jump into, I want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page with who are our gifted kids. I know we've all talked about that, gifted versus high ability, and we've seen all the myths about gifted kids. I think we all know that, but let's meet a gifted kid. Teresa and I like to always start with a video of that so that we can all have our minds on who it is that we're talking about this morning. So this is Carson in just a couple-minute video.
We're back on a Saturday morning with an extraordinary story out of Texas.
A prodigy is going to graduate today with a degree in physics.
NBC's Jacob Rascone shares his story. So we just plug these in here.
Mastering quantum physics is impressive on its own, but what's most remarkable about Carson Hui Yu
as the second derivative of position with respect to time
is that he's only 14 and he's graduating from Texas Christian University today, their youngest graduate ever.
I was 10 graduating high school, so it's really the only thing that I could do. It's not like I could stay at home for 8 years just doing nothing.
His mom, Claretta, says she realized Carson was pretty special when he was just a toddler.
Around age 3, he loved math, and he asked me if he could learn calculus, and I thought,
She homeschooled Carson until he was 5 when she knew he needed more.
So she took me to a public school, and they said that I was way too advanced. I ended up going to a high school, private high school.
A 5-year-old in 8th grade.
After that, I didn't skip anything and graduated at 10 years old.
That 10-year-old boy dove right into physics when he got to TCU. It would become his major along with a double minor in math and Chinese. Professor Magnus Ritby became a mentor to Carson.
One of the main principles have always been don't give him preferential treatment. Try to really treat him as any other college kid.
Of course, Carson really isn't your average college kid.
I still play games. I have my little brother Cannon. I still have friends my age. I have a puppy. I have all of those things that you would normally have, but it's just academically different.
In the fall, Carson will return to TCU for graduate school and eventually his PhD. But this time, he won't be the only member of the family on campus. His brother Cannon, just 11 years old, will be a freshman.
When I come to TCU, I'm going to major in astrophysics and engineering.
Claretta, the proud mom of the two youngest TCU students ever, says there is no magic parenting formula, just a love of learning.
I was blessed that God gave me such wonderful little boys, and they love to learn.
For today, Jacob Rascone, NBC News, Dallas.
Way to go, Carson.
That is impressive. What is she feeding them? Tell me the secrets.
She says there's no magic pill.
That
but,
is true.
I mean,
She's doing something.
yeah.
All right, I'll find out and I'll tweet it.
So you can see Carson's not one of our, probably like a gifted student that you've seen in your school. He's at one end there. But Carson had the support of his teachers, the support of his family. They accelerated him. So you can see that he was appropriately challenged and where he should be. So think about Carson as we're talking this morning, especially when we're talking about working with our regular education teachers. So
We're back on a Saturday morning.
There we go. So for the next hour, we're going to talk a little bit about collaborating with general education teachers. I'm going to give you some resources and tools that you can share with them if you're looking for some. We're going to talk about supporting underachieving gifted students, and then I have some resources, and then I'm here to answer questions too. So it doesn't have to be on these two topics. It could be on anything gifted related. And if I don't have the answer, we can get the answer for you, and I can get it back to Natalie. I will also share this slide deck with Natalie after I'm done today so that you can have it later. And I will say that one of the things that we have been doing at the state is talking to school districts about giving professional development to their teachers on gifted education. So in Chapter 16, it does state that schools should be providing professional development to gifted teachers and regular ed teachers and administrators on gifted education. So I'm sure if I polled everybody in this group today, there would probably be some of you that have had gifted education training for your regular ed teachers, but probably most have not. We're seeing it a lot more lately, which is great, because I think it gives our regular ed teachers an understanding of what these kids are like and how to work with them and how we should be supporting them to make sure that they're being challenged in the classroom. So I have a slide deck that is sort of a generic slide deck. If you're interested in going back and presenting to your school, to your regular ed teachers, it's something that can be done. You could do it in 15 minutes or you could take an hour to work with regular ed teachers. So I'm happy to share that as well for you if you're interested in doing that and presenting that to your teachers. So let's jump into collaborating with general ed teachers. So that everybody has a responsibility with our gifted students. It is not just up to you in the classroom. So your job as a gifted teacher, you're informing those regular ed teachers of their responsibilities in the GIEP. So after that GIEP meeting, you should be sharing that GIEP with at least those relevant teachers to make sure they know what their responsibilities are in regards to that student. You should be supporting teachers on differentiation or acceleration enrichment lessons. So if a teacher comes to you and says, I don't know what to do with this student, I need some support, then you should be able to provide some resources. And I'm going to give you some today that can help you if you do get those kind of questions. Another one of your jobs, schedule and conduct those GIEP meetings, report on GIEP goals. So progress monitoring, while we don't really in chapter 16, progress monitoring says it's just annually every year at the new GIP. We still want you to be contacting parents, making sure they know where the student is in regards to how far they've gotten with their goals. And then your job is to collect documents, analyze data, develop that GIEP, work with those students. And then you've got the general ed teachers. So they need to provide documentation to you about those students, how the students are doing in their classroom. So you may be doing that with some Google surveys or whatever that might be, or just talking with teachers, but they should be able to provide you with some insight to those students. They should be differentiating for their gifted learners. And they should also be monitoring the student, reporting information to teachers and parents. And then they should be attending the GIEP meetings. I know that's a difficult one, especially now when we're all sort of short-staffed and needing everybody. But even if a teacher can just step in at the beginning of the GIEP meeting to share anything that they have about that student and answer any questions that the family might have. It's really important that they're there as well, since they're with the students every day. So everybody has a job to do with gifted students. And you can see right here in chapter 16, this is right from chapter 16, implementation of specially designed instruction is the responsibility of both the gifted support staff and regular education teacher. So it's right there in chapter 16. Specially designed instruction is that enrichment, acceleration, or both that we are providing to the student for make sure that they are challenged. So we're adapting or modifying the curriculum, instruction, environments, methods, materials, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I'm going to give you some resources for that. And please feel free to, if you have a question, you can throw it in the chat, you can unmute and ask. Please feel free to interrupt me. I'm fine with that as well. This link here takes you to the gifted guidelines. And I will say the gifted guidelines, I think they're about 8 years old now, if not more. And I know that's one of the things that we want to work on to make sure that they're up to date, but there's still a good resource if you're looking for information or you have questions. It really just takes chapter 16 and writes it out and so that you can understand a little better and see what kinds of things that you can do based on those chapter 16 regulations. So when Natalie gave me this these topics, the first thing I thought of was this book study that our group, our gifted liaison group, has been that we got last year. I think it was last school year. Was this collaboration, co-teaching, and coaching in gifted education book. And so when we talk about working with general education teachers, this is sort of what PDE envisions would be the perfect way of working with general ed teachers as gifted teachers, as a coach or co-planning with a regular ed teacher to support those students. And I like this quote because this is so true. Gifted students, they're gifted all day, every day, but often their needs are only addressed for a few hours a week when they attend a gifted enrichment class. So a lot of our schools, when we talk to a lot of schools across the state, a lot have those pull-out programs. They pull the kids out for an hour a week or whatever it might be. Those, and I'm going to say those are fabulous. That does not say that those aren't good. Those are great because gifted students need that time with other gifted students. So pulling them out and giving them a time to work with each other is, part of doing some great things for gifted students. So it's not saying that they're not good, but we actually need to address their needs all day, every day. So in the book, the book I'm gonna reference a little bit here because I thought they had some really great tools for you to use. They talk about the different types of collaboration. I just sort of listed them out so that we are all sort of aware of what the different types are. Consultation, I think, none of us are probably doing that right now, where I think we're all working directly with students. Co-planning, I'm going to talk about that. So working with a teacher and planning together for how you're going to differentiate for the students in their classroom, with your support being how they're going to differentiate for the gifted learners. Co-teaching, so 2 or more teachers teaching at the same time. And then coaching, so you would act as a coach for the regular ed teachers and provide resources, guide them, and then it includes a lot of reflection afterwards. I think that's one of the things that we always miss, is that reflection piece after we do something or work on something. We always forget to go back and say, did it work or did it not work, and why or why not, and make the changes that are necessary for that. So I know there's obstacles, and I know as I'm talking already, you're probably thinking in your head, I don't have time to co-plan. I don't have time to co-teach. I don't have time. And I totally understand that. And so a lot of times what we say is baby steps. If you want to do something, if you want to try this, maybe one teacher, if you could get one teacher on board to work with you, that it might grow into something bigger. And these aren't even all the obstacles that the book listed that could be an obstacle to coaching and collaboration and co-planning with a teacher. But I picked these out because I think these are some of the biggest ones. I think planning time is probably the biggest one that I hear the most from teachers. You just don't have the time to plan. So I do understand that. And administrative support is another huge one. And I think if you can get administrative support along with, might get along with that some time to plan, to co-plan. So there are a lot of obstacles. Communicating your clear purposes and roles. So if you decide to work with a teacher on this, and you may already be doing that, and you both may have, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move forward. Building a toolkit. And that's one of the things I'm going to help you with today, is just having a toolkit ready. So if a teacher comes to you, if you don't have time to go meet with them and plan, be ready for if that math teacher comes to you and says, I have a student, I'm not sure what to do. They're not being challenged and I don't know how to differentiate for this student. Have something ready to go so you can say, well, here's some things you could try before, trying different things with that student. And that toolkit will help as we get through our next topic of underachieving students as well. Implement differentiation together, not different activities. And I think sometimes, and I will say, this is something we've seen years ago. So probably, when differentiation was that hot button word there, like probably 15 years ago, there was a lot of confusion about what differentiation really was. I feel like that's we've gotten away from that a lot. I think people are understanding what they need to do, but it's not more work. It's not just different activities. It's going deeper into topic. So instead of doing, one thing and you say, hey, let's do this activity where all the kids are building a building and then we're going to put it on earthquake table and see how it goes. I mean, that's fun activity, but not differentiation. It's just a different activity. And then that reflection piece. I know that's always an obstacle too, because then you've got to find the time to go back and reflect on what you did. So lots of obstacles. And in a little bit, I'm going to have you, we got to do some networking today. So we've got to talk a little bit about what we're already doing and what are some tips you might have. So if you're already doing some of this, I'll be thrilled to hear what's going on out there. So research, when you go talk to regular ed teachers, you can share some of the research out there. 40 to 50% of students already know some of the material that's presented at grade level. They experience no differentiation 85% of the time in the classroom. And when the pacer is quicker and when there's less repetition, they retain new information and skills better. So there is research out there that differentiation does work when it's used properly. So repetition, let's talk about repetition. A lot of times our gifted students do not need 20 math problems in order to figure out what it is that they're working on. They may have already mastered it. Maybe they only need 3 problems or 5 problems. They typically learn in 1 to 3 repetitions when it takes the average student 10 or more. High ability students have already mastered the content and they need to be challenged by new learning. And then more work does not mean that an activity is more challenging or differentiated. So think about those students that, maybe they're afraid even to turn something in early because they might just get more work. So, and that will factor in later as we're talking about our underachieving students as well. So this table is in the book, and I printed it out for you to take a look at, so co-planning with a regular ed teacher, how that could look like. And I really like the questions that you could walk into a meeting with a regular ed teacher and talk about. So what are the lesson plans and goals? What are your objectives? How do you want to work with that student? What is it that they need, or what needs do they have in the classroom? How might we pre-assess students, and how will this impact grouping? Pre-assessing is so important, especially in our world with gifted students, to find out where they are initially, and maybe what they've already mastered and what content they haven't mastered. So working with that teacher to figure out how can you pre-assess what they already know, and if you do pre-assess, will you group the students? There is lots of information out there on cluster grouping, which is great for gifted students, and grouping students together that are of like abilities is a specially designed instruction that you can put in the SDI area of your GIEP if you're grouping students by abilities. What differentiation strategies are you going to use to advance the content, build the buy-in, and create challenge? How are you going to assess student learning? And then what are the next steps? And then so you each have some responsibilities before the meeting. So the classroom teacher will make sure that you have the lesson. When you get the lesson, planning those materials and those differentiation strategies. And then both of you should have some initial ideas based on the lesson plan. And then after the lesson, you'll both review, reflect, review the assessments. While you're meeting together, planning for that pre-assessment, groupings, you're discussing and deciding on those, deciding what strategies you're going to use, deciding what assessments you're going to use, and then discussing how you might use that differentiation in the future. And then after that meeting, the classroom teacher is doing the pre-assessment, they're administering it. The gifted teacher is just getting ready those differentiated materials that you're going to use. Rubrics are created and modified, and then implement next steps, reflect, implement next steps. So if you're already co-planning, it's a great guide to use that might help maybe get that meeting get through it a little quicker to make sure that you're both on the same page. So ABCs of differentiation, I like this as well. What we're talking about when we talk about differentiation. So A, we've got advance the content. So accelerate the content and pace, provide advanced resources. I know one of the things in ELA we talk about a lot is if all the students in the class are reading a book and you've got a gifted student in the class that has a strength in ELA, maybe give them a little bit more rigorous book, a little more high level book for them to read while everyone's reading that book, and then doing whatever activity or questions you have at the end. Introduce advanced vocabulary and concepts. That's a way to dive deeper into a topic. And content expert thinking. So, maybe that student, they've already mastered the content. Maybe that's what how we should think. Maybe they should become that content expert and give them more information to really dive into that topic. Build buy-in. And this build buy-in comes back to when we talk about underachieving students. Build in some choices. Choices are great for students, give them different choices of how they want to complete an activity. Harness motivation. So getting them motivated to do that, and doing that by creating some value to it. So, is it something that they're interested in? Is it something that they can identify with? Is it something that they're looking forward to doing in their future? And do they feel like it's worth their time and effort? And so as you're crafting GIEP goals for them, think about that as well. Like, how will the students feel about those goals? And do you think that they'll achieve them? Will there be some buy-in there? And create challenge. So challenging them with depth and complexity. We're going to talk about that as well. Love that. Critical thinking, creative thinking, high-level thinking, abstract thinking. A lot of those you're getting as well when you're doing those competitions with your students, and that's great. But they can also be getting that in the classroom as well with the regular ed teachers. Any questions so far? I know I'm going to give a lot of information today. So this is an article that you can take a look at later. It's a nice, easy article. It has 6 strategies for challenging gifted learners. when we do regular ed program and we talk to regular ed teachers, we share this slide, and we talk about some of these strategies that they could use. So like enabling gifted students to work together. We just talked about that. Great way to have students cluster grouping, working together. Most difficult first. So those math problems, teacher's going to assign 20 math problems at night. And, you know, for the gifted student, maybe they could say, you know what, just do the, 5 most difficult problems for me. And if you can do those, then you don't have to do the rest of them. I had a teacher share that he's a math teacher, and he said he does mild, medium, and spicy. And he tells the kids, if you can do the spicy questions, then you don't have to do the mild and medium questions. So doing those kind of most difficult first, and that would engage those gifted students. You know what, I can get those five done easy, and then I don't have to do the rest of the homework. Plan for tiered learning. So a teacher had said they plan to have, that basic, the medium, and then the high level different activities ready to go for most of their lessons, so that whenever they get to that lesson, if they're finding that some students have already got it, they give them the higher activity that they have planned. Speak to student interest. So planning independent projects, project-based learning, all that stuff is great. Letting a student as a goal work on something, a project that they have interest in, maybe even it's a career type of a project. And pre-test for volunteers. So asking students, and this could be for anybody, it doesn't have to be just for gifted students. Anybody want to pre-test for this next unit? And if you do, and you show that you've mastered the content, then you'll accelerate through and you'll do these other activities instead. So pre-assessment, so important for our gifted students. It gives us that idea of where they're at. So the other thing we talked about when we were talking about differentiation was depth and complexity. So depth and complexity, there's a framework that was developed by Lisa Van Gemert and Ian Bird. And I do want to show you some of their resources, because has anybody heard of Lisa Van Gemert and Ian? I see some shaking of heads, and great. So Lisa Van Gemert's the gifted guru. She's been at the PAGE conference a few times, and she does a lot of webinars here in the state. And she has a website, thegiftedguru.com, and they talk about depth and complexity in this Gifted Guild's Guide to Depth and Complexity, which I purchased on Amazon. It's really a good book. They're really good writers. I really enjoy it. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that, an overview about it, because I think this might be a tool that you could easily pass on to regular ed teachers that they might be able to use. Some of you, yay! Dally said you guys focused on depth and complexity already at your fall network meeting. Awesome. So I'm just going to give an overview. If you want to talk more about it, we can. And I'd love to hear after your fall gifted networking meeting, what if you guys did anything with depth and complexity, and did anything come out of that? So it allows teachers to differentiate for any grade level or any content area. Easy to implement. It's effective. So I'm sure you probably talked about these. So as part of the framework, they use these 11 emojis or emoticons to put on the framework. And you can see they're different ones that related to a topic. So trends, ethics, details, big idea, what happens over time, seeing things from multiple perspectives, patterns, looking for patterns in something, language of the discipline, the rules. What are the rules, and did they follow the rules? What are some unanswered questions that you have about that, and how would that work across disciplines? So what would that look like? So depth. When you think deeply, you think about the language being used, the questions we have, trends, ethic, details, big ideas, patterns, rules. You think of all those. So we've got depth there, and I got this from this graphic from this blog, which she did a really good job on this blog, and I like the graphics that she used here. So looking at things complex, it's more about looking at it from more than one point of view, how things have changed over time. how things are connected across disciplines. And I like how she showed us how that worked by using the 3 little pigs, and I only pulled a few of them out. So, you know, after you read the 3 little pigs, this is how sort of that framework would work. So language of the discipline, instead of huffed and puffed, what other words could the author have used? If you were an architect, how would you describe the way the pigs built their houses? The title, what does that make you wonder about? What do you wish you knew about the wolf and why? Why did they pick those materials for their houses? And then details. What information about each pig is important for us to know? Use the details about their home to make a prediction. Big idea, what's the purpose of the story? What details support your answer? Who agrees or disagrees? And so in the book, they get into each one of these and how that you can use that. And then and I'm gonna jump over to, if you're not familiar with Birdseed and Gifted Guru, let's see where I'm at here. Oh, and then this is the complexity part, changing over time. How did the wolf's behavior change from the beginning to the end? What word patterns did you notice in the story? And then what rules did the author follow? Did they follow the rules? And then what would happen if they did not? So a little example of how that works for depth and complexity. And there are frameworks out there for you to get right off of the website. And I want to show, I'm going to do a new share here. Okay, so you should be seeing the Gifted Guru website. And this is Lisa Van Gemmert. Now, I will say, if you've not been on her website, she sends an email. She has an email list. You can add your name to the email list. She does send freebies out here and there, and some great stuff. She has a lot of blog articles that are all great, lots of free resources. She does have some paid things on her website, so you don't have to do all those, but you can get some free resources on her site. One of the things that we've used a lot on her site is Patrice and I have done these interview with a gifted kid. And so you can she has interviews with gifted kids on her site, so you can read a little bit about them as well. And then Ian Birdseed, I always call him Ian Birdseed. It's Ian Bird. He probably gets that all the time. So Ian Bird had this website, Birdseed, and it's been around for, he said 14 years old, and it has over 506 articles. So he has a lot of resources on here. And honestly, if you go down to examples of differentiated lessons, he's got a lot listed in here that you can take a look through. The depth and complexity will take you here to some articles. And then he also has some example frameworks on his website that you can pull off. And then you can put the emojis on there of how you want to set up the framework. So, you know, the framework, there's 11 different emojis that you can use, but it's sort of like, it's a buffet. It's not a dinner. So you can choose which ones you want to use with whatever topic that you're going to use. And so you can just pull those out and then add those to whatever framework, whatever map kind of that works for you. I want to share just a couple of resource pages. These are to add to your toolkit. So hopefully some of these things might help. These are just kind of all, these are all links that'll take you to different sheets. So you can see this is a Padlet. Patrice actually got started and we've been adding to. So differentiated instruction for advanced learners, lots of resources on here. Most difficult first. So this really, I think this is the one that's like a story about a student who is gifted in math, and they give them most difficult problems to do first. Anchor activities. So an anchor activity is that activity that you may have something, you know, for example, a gifted student might be working on independent projects. So every time they would finish early, they could go back to that anchor activity. They could go back to that independent project. So this document talks about anchor activities and then gives you some ideas for what you could use as anchor activities, that if a student does finish early, what is it they could go do? They could just go pick up that. And then I want to give you these, the Gifted Guru link, Birdseed link, and then Gifted Guide. So this one came around during the pandemic. This teacher created this Gifted Guide website, and has been adding to it. And there's a lot of free resources on the site, which are great. She does have a paid section, but there's a lot of great free resources on her website as well. So hopefully out of all of those, at least one of those is new to you that you could start sharing with your teachers. Okay, so now let's move to our students and those underachieving students. I know we get this question a lot, and this is not, there's no easy answer for this one. It's difficult. So let's just talk about who is that underachiever. This is when there's a significant discrepancy between actual achievement and expected achievement. So, those students that are sitting in the class and, we think they should be getting A's and they're not, or they should be doing something and they're not. And I know, I'm guessing, if not all of you, most of you have gotten a regular ed teacher over the years that have said, how is this kid gifted? He's in my class and he's gifted and he's not showing me that he's gifted. So that's sort of what we're talking about here, is so those kinds of kids that are not showing their giftedness there. So what are some of those potential causes? And these aren't all of them, but a lot of what we've seen, this is where the causes have lied. So their perception that what they're learning isn't useful, relevant, meaningful. So that could be a problem. Fear of being rejected for being different. In my gifted networking sessions, we've had some really good discussions about the gifted label. And there's a great video from Stanford University that interviews different adults and young students about that gifted label and how they felt about it. And a lot of them said, they hated that label because it showed the other kids that they were smart and they didn't, they got made fun of for it. So that might be, one of the issues. Maybe they don't like being labeled gifted, and so they're underachieving on purpose. Lack of goals or a sense that they're unattainable. I always think with this one, I had a parent a few years ago was very upset with their district because he wanted all of his students' goals to be 100%. They would get 100% in every class. And I kept saying that's, how stressful that would be for that student. I said, what's the odds of them getting 100% in every class? So making their goals attainable for them. Fear of getting more work for early completion. We just talked about that. Perfectionism. I have one of those here, where ripped it up before he even took the test and turned it in, or put an F on the top and turned, because just didn't feel like, if it wasn't going to be perfect, they didn't want to do it. Work that's too easy or too difficult. So that, that could be a problem. If it's too easy, they might not want to be doing it. Lack of opportunity for them to demonstrate what they know in ways that are compatible with their learning preference. Lack of opportunity to learn about areas of interest and learning environment. So how they're learning, is that working for them? I know, like over the pandemic, when we went into virtual classes, I think it was interesting to see. So I have two sons, and one's in high school now. He was in middle school during the pandemic, and I had a high schooler. And it was crazy to see my high schooler flourished in the virtual world. He loved it. He did great. He had all A's. He was doing great. My middle schooler, on the other hand, did not flourish in that environment. Definitely is in person, likes to be in school, and is happy and back to making some good grades and doing better. And so is it the learning environment that they're in as well? And we want to make sure that we are talking about, with our students, the growth mindset, making sure that they, know it's okay to fail. It's not that, you're not good at it. Just you should try, and, trying new things and thinking failure is just an opportunity to grow. It's not a bad thing. So, when you go to those competitions, when they leave learning that, it's okay that I didn't place first, second, or third place, but that you're learning. I know speaking of my son, he thought he was terrible in math. He hated math all these years. This year, loves math, has A's in math all year long, and said, you know what, I'm not bad in math. He just realized it wasn't the right learning style for him. And this year, him and the teacher just really have gelled, and he's doing much better. So I love to see. I always used to tell him, you're not bad at math. My dad was a math teacher, and I was good. I'm sure you're not bad at math, but So we want to make sure that we're doing that growth mindset. And I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not alone. So in chapter 16, it does state that there is a GIP team, and this team is the one that looks at present levels of educational performance. They're the ones that determine the placement of the student. So if a student is struggling, if you have an underachieving student, they're not meeting their goals, they're not, maybe you have a pull-out program, they're not coming to the pull-out program. You could pull that GIP team together to talk about what are the causes there, what are the underlying issues with that student, and how can you fix that. So just remember, you're not alone. You've got the parents, the student. You can always bring the student if they're an older student. Maybe that's something you could bring them in with to the team to talk about. A representative of the district as part of that GIP team, their current teachers, and then you are as well on that team. So don't forget about that you're not making all these decisions by yourself. And I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Jim Delisle, but Jim Delisle has been, and I saw Simone's on here, the PAGE president, but so Jim Delisle has been at the PAGE conference quite a few times over the years and is a wonderful presenter and keynote speaker. He has a lot of great books out there, and this is one of his sort of most popular books, Doing Poorly on Purpose. And so I took some things from this book as we're talking about underachieving. And he says in his book, no one wants to be an underachiever. You don't think about it and say, I want to underachieve. There's some issues there. He said it tends to be an issue of dignity, not curriculum. So it's not the curriculum that is creating the issue. So if a student isn't feeling like the material is challenging enough for them, maybe that's something inside. That's something to their dignity, not to the curriculum. And every underachiever is good at and passionate about something. And I think this as well, that everybody has something that they are passionate to, talk about or get into. So think about that as you're working with those that are underachieving. So some strategies. And Jim Delisle, there's a blog here there's another great resource, Davidson Gifted. Davidson Institute is for really profoundly gifted students, but they have a lot of great resources on their website. And they have a blog, and one of the blog posts was Jim Delisle and his Doing Poorly on Purpose. And so a few of the strategies that he's provided, which I think are really great strategies to start with whenever you have a student that's underachieving, comparing where they are succeeding in school and where they're not. So where they are succeeding, why? What is it that's going on in that class versus the one that they're not succeeding in, and what's different? This one I have a feeling might get some interesting discussion points, but the underachieving child needs to be acknowledged for attempts, not just successes. And I feel like this kind of goes along with that growth mindset. Encouraging them, yes, you're doing it just because you didn't get perfect. It's okay. So acknowledging them for trying. Get away from questioning who's at fault and work towards resolving the situation. So, don't think about, is it the curriculum? Is it the assignments? Is it the student? Is it the teacher? Is it the parent? Don't think about who's at fault in those situations. Just think about what is it that's going on with the student and how to get to the bottom of it, that what it is. And maybe it's rewriting goals. Maybe it's an independent project that would help change that student. Lots of different ways, and there's really no one good answer to work with underachieving students. Okay, so resources. I said I'd end with the resources. I want to give you some places that you can go. One is, so Natalie does some great stuff at Westmoreland IU with Gifted. Patrice and I do a lot of webinars and things like that for statewide. And the one thing that we have coming up, so we have a webinar coming up next week. It's free. It's a 2-hour webinar on February 22nd called Building Capacity to Support Higher Achieving Students. This webinar is actually being run by the PVOS team in Pennsylvania, and they're going to talk about PVOS data and how to use that with your gifted students. I'm going to encourage you, if you can't attend on February 22nd at 9 a.m., but you would like the recording and you would like the resources, just register. I'm going to send you the link that says, here's the Zoom link to join that day. But afterwards, the group that registers, I will send the recording and all the links to. So register even if you know that you're not able to attend. Or if you just want to attend and just listen in, you can do that and jump in and jump off whenever you need. The other thing Patrice and I do, we run these monthly goal clinics. And so these are really just office hours for us. Our next one and our last one actually for the school year is March 7th at 9. And these are, there's no new material presented. What we do is we walk through, we have a document on GIEPs, and we walk through the PLEP section, we walk through goals and what goals should look like, and short-term learning outcomes and specially designed instruction. And then after we're done with that, we do some breakout rooms, and then we have just some time for questions. So we're there for 2 hours. You can jump on and off. We have a lot of teachers that just like to join and just be a fly on the wall and listen, and that's fine. You can do that as well, because a lot of questions come up that are really interesting questions. Sometimes we have to go back to Shirley and get some clarification. But if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that on March 7th at 9 a.m. And then we also do 2 statewide gifted webinars a year. So the Department of Education, one of their goals is to reach out to administrators. Because there are some differences between special education and gifted education. A lot of administrators are in that special ed world and don't know some of those differences. So that's one reason why we want to get to them. And also to make sure they understand, what are the Chapter 16 regulations they should be following? What should we be doing for our students? And how important gifted education is. So we provide updates during that meeting. We usually provide about 45 minutes to an hour of updates and content, and then we leave it open for questions. And I know in the past, like when we first started doing this, questions would go on for an hour and a half. The last time, I don't think they were that, we didn't have that many, but we do stick around and answer questions. Our Eventbrite page is linked here, and that's where you can register for all of our programs. When we add anything new, we put it there as well. Right now, those are the only ones I think that are listed there. I just wanted to mention too, you were probably given some information back in the fall about Chapter 16 roundtables. So Chapter 16 every 4 years can be reopened and reauthorized and changed. The last time that this happened, they didn't open Chapter 16. Oh, thanks, Natalie, for giving that link there. They didn't open Chapter 16, but what they did was they provided recommendations to the department on what they should be doing to improve gifted services in the state, basically. And so some of the recommendations that came out in 2019 were, I know one was defining acceleration enrichment, like changing that definition. We had a lot of people bringing that up. Another one was hiring Patrice and I. So one of the things was recommending that Shirley have some people that can provide training and support and communication. So that came out of it. So right now, so the roundtables were in the fall. The State Board of Education collected all that data. They had about 27 people provide information and their comments about Chapter 16. And now they have put all those things together. PDE has a work group that is just PDE people and a lawyer and people like that, talking about the comments that came in and what are some of the comments that can be recommendations, and what are some that would actually mean that we would have to reopen Chapter 16. So we should hear in the next couple of months what the decision is, if they're going to reopen it and make any changes, or if it's just going to be recommendations. So we have no idea sort of where they're leaning. My personal opinion is I think with the new administration, I think we're not going to see Chapter 16 reopened. I think we're going to see a lot of recommendations, but who knows? Because there were some really great things brought up. I know a few of them were lower caseload. A few people wanted to see a lower caseload of 50 is what they were looking at. I know a few of us, and I brought it up too, is reevaluation Like if a gifted student doesn't want a GIEP anymore, if a parent wants to be, doesn't want that GIEP anymore, you have to do this whole reevaluation process, and it's a ton of paperwork for what is eventually going to end up being they're going to be removed from services. So we want something simpler for that process. So those are some of the things that we asked for. I'm hoping that those are some of the things that will be addressed this year. So we will find out. Not only have that information as soon as it comes out, and she can share that with you. And if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer that. And then some PA resources that Patrice and I have put together. These are both Padlets. We love Padlets, a great way to share resources. This strategies to support gifted learners, lots of great stuff. These are, this Padlet came out of our boot camp. So this is for teachers by teachers, have added stuff throughout the boot camps that we've done. Lots of great enrichment ideas, acceleration, blogs to follow, Twitter accounts to follow. And then we have a gifted teacher Padlet that just has some more one-stop shopping for documents and contacts and blogs and things like that. We've put it all together in one place for you. And I think that's it.